there and welcome to All 24's Nightly News with me, Mariam Zidan, to the headlines. Zionist forces continue to carry out the massacres across the Gaza Strip as the humanitarian crisis deepens. UNRWA warns that it is difficult to distribute aid without its presence, while UNICEF says new aid distribution plans will only worsen the suffering of children. So coming up next, ongoing shelling shakes Port Sudan for the 6th consecutive day. The army reports dozens killed from the rapid support forces in Al-Fasher as the government calls for legal action against the UAE and others involved in alleged acts of genocide. Also tonight, calls are growing to end Moroccan violations in the region. The United Nations expresses concern over continued harassment of Sahrawi activists, while the anniversary of the Polisario fronts found and sees renewed pledges to pursue the struggle for freedom and independence. And Pakistani civilians killed in Indian shelling on Kashmir amid rising border tensions. The two sides trade accusations of cross-border attacks as Islamabad warns that New Delhi's actions are pushing the two nuclear-armed states to the brink of major conflict. Hello and welcome back to your nightly news. First in our news file, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza said Friday that 27 martyrs had arrived at hospitals across the Gaza Strip in the past 24 hours. In the statement, the ministry announced that the death toll has risen to 2,678 martyrs and 7,308 wounded since the resumption of the aggression on the Strip. The ministry also noted that the total death toll from the Israeli aggression on Gaza since October 7, 2023 has reached 52,787 martyrs. The Zionist occupation acknowledged on Friday morning that 2 soldiers were killed and 4 others wounded in clashes with the resistance in the Gaza Strip. According to an official statement, the 2 soldiers belonged to engineering and Golani brigades and were killed in 2 separate operations during the battles in the southern part of the Strip. UNRWA spokesperson Juliette Thomas says it would be nearly impossible to distribute humanitarian aid in Gaza without the agency. In a press briefing, Thomas stressed that no organization could replace UNRWA in a place like Gaza, calling it the largest humanitarian agency operating there. She added that the agency has more than 10,000 staff on the ground working to deliver the few remaining supplies, emphasizing that it's hard to imagine any aid effort without UNRWA's presence. The UNICEF has criticized new plans by Israel and the US to manage humanitarian aid in Gaza, warning they could worsen the suffering of children and families. The proposal would assign food distribution to a newly formed body called the Gaza Relief Foundation. Spokesperson James Elder said the plan would force families to travel long distances under dangerous conditions to reach aid centers, putting children at serious risk.
But after careful analysis, it appears the design of the plan presented by Israel to the humanitarian community will increase ongoing suffering of children and families in the Gaza Strip. So the use of humanitarian aid as a bait to force displacement, especially from the north to the south, will create this impossible choice between displacement and...
2 Palestinians were martyred after Israeli occupation forces shelled a house in Nablus in the northern occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Red Crescent reported that Israeli forces stormed Al-Masakin neighborhood in eastern Nablus, besieged a house, and demanded those inside surrender, while imposing a tight security lockdown and setting up checkpoints throughout the city. Gunfire and explosions were heard in the area, and sources added that Israeli forces also raided the town of Beit Omar, north of Hebron, in the southern West Bank.
بلغنا انه في دار محاصره في منطقه عين كوكوب وتوجهنا بامور كثيره طبعا منعنا فات.
In Hebrew, media reported on Friday that a missile fired from Yemen set off sirens in Al-Quds and dozens of other locations deep inside Israeli territory. The Israeli military said it tracked the missile and launched an interception attempt. The US-made THAAD system failed to stop it for the second time this week. Air traffic at Ben Gurion Airport was briefly halted, and reports say millions headed to shelters after the launch. The Rapid Support Forces launched drone attacks for the sixth consecutive day on the city of Port Sudan, the temporary seat of the Sudanese government in eastern Sudan. Military sources confirmed Friday that air defenses engaged several RSF drones targeting installations and locations in the city. Local media reported drone strikes on the northwest and south of the strategic city, aiming to block humanitarian aid delivery. The 6th Infantry Division in Al-Fasher announced that the armed forces had, following intense clashes, succeeded in destroying or disabling all RSF vehicles and killed or wounded dozens of RSF fighters. The same sources reported that neighborhoods in Al-Fasher were intermittently shelled by RSF forces using 120mm and 82mm artillery shells, resulting in civilian deaths and injuries. The wounded were transferred to hospitals and medical centers. The Sudanese government demanded the prosecution of foreign experts involved in operating drone systems, citing confirmed information that these operations received direct support from the UAE, which it says amounts to complicity in committing genocide in Sudan. Sudanese Minister of Culture and Information and government spokesperson Khalid Al-Aysar wrote in a post on Facebook that Sudan is a strong state because of its people and armed forces. The state will not collapse due to drones or the spread of lies. And on Thursday, the UN Security Council called for an immediate end to the fighting in South Sudan and extended the peacekeeping mission's mandate for another year. The Council urged all warring parties and armed groups to cease hostilities immediately and engage in political dialogue, while ending violence against civilians. In a resolution passed with 12 votes in favor and 3 abstentions, the Council expressed particular concern about reports of indiscriminate use of barrel bombs. The Polisario Front has outlined the serious human rights violations by Moroccan forces against Sahrawi activists. Speaking at the 83rd session of the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights, Sahrawi Ambassador Naail called on the Commission to condemn reprisals against human rights defenders and demand the release of political prisoners. He also urged the creation of an independent monitoring mechanism to support the credibility of UN and African Union efforts.
We commend the Committee's commitment to protecting human rights defenders across our continent, an effort that must continually be strengthened given the gravity of the situation and the critical importance of ensuring the safety of these brave men and women who stand up for human rights. We welcome all initiatives aimed at supporting and safeguarding them. Today, the Sahrawi Republic finds it necessary to draw the Committee's attention to the ongoing and escalating repression faced by Sahrawi human rights defenders and civil society activists in general in the occupied territories of Western Sahara. This repression is marked by systematic violation of fundamental rights, including freedom of expression, association, peaceful assembly, and physical and psychological integrity.
In the same context, Sahrawi Ambassador Naail also urged the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention to secure the immediate release of Sahrawi activists held without the due legal process.
I call on the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention to demand the immediate release of Sahrawi activists who are being held without due process. Moreover, UN human rights experts have condemned the attacks on human rights defenders in Western Sahara, highlighting cases of intimidation, harassment, death threats, as well as physical and sexual assaults. Yet Morocco refuses to respond to any of these calls and recommendations, enjoying ongoing impunity, which is quite frankly alarming.
And the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders, Mary Lalour, has voiced deep concern over the acts of intimidation, defamation, and restrictions on freedom of movement in assembly imposed by Morocco on Ali Salem Tamek, head of the collective of Sahrawi human rights defenders in Western Sahara. In a post on social media, Lalour said she had formally addressed the Moroccan government regarding politically motivated harassment and threats targeting the Sahrawi activist.
I have addressed the Moroccan government regarding the harassment, physical assaults, politically motivated threats, and surveillance targeting Sahrawi human rights defender Ali Salem Tamek.
The Polisario Front reiterated its commitment to the Sahrawi people's continued struggle against the Moroccan occupation until all their goals of freedom and independence are achieved. The Polisario Front's representative to the UN, Mohammed Sidi Ammar, confirmed in a statement to Al Jazeera International TV that the front, which is celebrating the 52nd anniversary of its founding, will continue the struggle of the Sahrawi people until sovereignty is restored over the entire territory of the Sahrawi Republic.
As you know, after decades of peaceful resistance to Spanish colonialism and within the framework of the recognition of the United Nations of the struggle of our people and their destiny, this is a necessity. It is necessary to consolidate their struggle within the framework of a movement to secure their homeland. If you adopt armed resistance as a means to secure your homeland, they will not be able to dismantle it. This has been more than half a century of generosity, struggle, and resistance to continue the struggle of the project under the leadership of the only representative of the people, the Polisario Front, and until it achieves its uncompromising goals to this day and to remain in the lordship and exception.
On Saturday, the Sahrawis commemorate the 52nd anniversary of the founding of the Polisario Front, recognized by the United Nations as the sole legitimate representative of the Sahrawi people. The anniversary comes amidst the ongoing armed struggle against the Moroccan occupier and amidst political and diplomatic achievements in favor of the Sahrawi cause. Usama Ayadi has the report.
52 years is the age of the Polisario Front, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Sagha al-Hamra and Rio de Oro, the front that saw the light of day on May 10, 1973, as a national liberation movement whose goal was to end Spanish colonialism and restore the sovereignty of the Sahrawi people. After the expulsion of the last Spanish soldier, the front found itself facing a new confrontation with what was supposed to be a sister country, supporting the Sahrawis in starting the process of building their independent state. However, the expansionist ambitions of the Makhzen led it to occupy large parts of Western Sahara, which prompted the Polisario to continue its path of resistance. After years of struggle, the Polisario Front has become the sole internationally recognized legitimate representative of the Sahrawi people in accordance with the United Nations resolutions, most notably General Assembly Resolution 3734 of 1979. On the international stage, the front has achieved significant legal and diplomatic gains. The most recent of these was the European Court of Justice's final ruling affirming the special legal character of Western Sahara and its rejection of any agreement covering its territory without the consent of its people. On the ground, the Polisario Front continues to mobilize international support, while solidarity with its cause expands. The latest example is the Freedom March, which began on March 30th from French territory, passing through Spain toward Morocco to demand the release of Sahrawi political prisoners. Sahrawis view the anniversary of the Polisario Front's founding not only as an annual remembrance of the history of struggle, but also as a moment to renew their pledge to continue the just struggle until full independence is achieved and the last vestiges of colonialism are ended on the African continent.
And in a rare show of defiance, French lawmakers are urging their government to recognize the colonial crimes committed in Algeria, a call that coincides with Algeria's National Day of Memory, as France faces growing pressure to confront a painful chapter of its past. Hassan Barkan.
Contrary to France's official stance, many voices in the French parliament are charting a different course. Parliamentarians, senators, and local officials are not only urging their country to recognize its crimes in Algeria, but also condemning the continued denial of the genocide committed by the French colonial forces. May 8th, Algeria's National Day of Remembrance, honors the innocent civilians killed by the French troops. The date lays bare France's hypocrisy. While it marks Victory Day over Nazism, it also recalls the brutal repression of unarmed Algerians, one of the darkest chapters of its colonial past.
Nous sommes plusieurs députés à avoir depuis un an.
We have been working for a whole year on a project, alongside a group of historians, associations, and even families of the victims of the May 8, 1945 massacres. And our project aims to push France to recognize the crimes it committed against Algerians during that period.
These selective and calculated acknowledgements of France's crimes in Algeria are seen as Paris' attempt to sidestep the full truth, a truth documented in archived evidence still hidden in the depth of what France calls its museum of mankind.
The massacres that took place across several cities in Algeria over the course of many days must be officially recognized. Working on memory is essential at laying the foundation for restoring Algerian-French relations. Denying these massacres is one of the main reasons those relations remain stalled.
Je pense que c'est le devoir de toutes et tous, qu'on soit français ou algérien.
It's our duty to be here today, in this country that represents a part of our shared history. As French citizens, we must acknowledge these massacres. Participating today helped me dive deeper into the topic and discover truths I didn't know before.
Despite internal divisions, France's far right remains united in its hostility toward Algeria, glorifying colonial crimes and exposing glaring double standards. Their stance reopens deep wounds, from civilians thrown from the cliffs to others burned alive or disemboweled, atrocities committed by French officials during the colonial era. In contrast, growing calls from French parliamentarians for France to acknowledge these crimes highlight the far-right isolation. Confronting the truth is essential. It enables public accountability and reveals those who weaponize hate for political gain.
French parliamentarians and elected officials continuing their visit to Algeria as part of the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the May 8, 1945 massacres have emphasized the need to raise awareness about historical issues, such as the massacres committed by colonial France in Algeria. The French delegation, which visited the Great Mosque of Algiers in the Algerian capital on Friday, emphasized the importance of continuing efforts to ensure France's full recognition of its responsibility for the May 8, 1945 massacres.
It's an important date, talking about the massacres of May 8, 1945. In Steve Galman Kharrata, we must support their preservation within the collective memory of peoples. This date is unknown to many historians, known to the general public. May 8, 1945, in these three cities, was a day when Algerians demonstrated against genocide and colonialism. Unfortunately, these demonstrations turned into what we know today as the May 8, 1944 massacres.
The Pakistani army announced it had shot down at least 77 drones launched by India into various areas of Pakistan between Wednesday and Thursday. A military statement said that more than 29 Indian drones were downed earlier and 48 others had been destroyed since the previous night. This comes as Islamabad and New Delhi continue to trade accusations over launching drones into each other's territory. Pakistan's information minister announced on Friday that 5 civilians were killed and more than 20 others injured in cross-border shelling with India. According to Reuters, citing the minister, the shelling occurred along the line of control with India, causing the deaths of 5 civilians and the injuries and injuries to 29 others. This followed an earlier police report that 4 civilians had been killed in overnight Indian shelling on the Pakistani-administered side of Kashmir. Pakistan's foreign ministry has warned that India's actions have brought the two nuclear-armed nations to the brink of a major conflict. Spokesperson Mumtaz Zahra Baloch said India's war hysteria should be a serious concern for the international community as military tensions continue between the two countries despite global calls for restraint and calm. And in other news, Israeli occupation forces launched a series of hostile drones targeting towns and villages in southern Lebanon. Lebanese media sources confirmed on Thursday that an Israeli drone dropped a sound bomb on a stone factory in the town of Kafr Kila, causing fires in the area. The sources added that hostile drone activity has been intense in the western sector of the country since the early morning hours. And elsewhere, Russian President Vladimir Putin affirmed on Friday that the entire country supports the military operation in Ukraine, emphasizing that the Russian people remain united in the face of challenges. In his speech during the Victory Day celebrations, Putin said that the Russian army continues to fight decisive battles on all fronts, stressing that all of Russia, its society and people support those participating in the special military operation in Ukraine. The governor of Zaporizhia region, Ivan Fedorov, announced that Russian forces bombed 8 villages in the southern part of the region about 220 times, despite the ceasefire. Fedorov stated on Telegram Friday that the shelling involved up to 150 drones and 70 artillery shells over the past 24 hours, noting that the affected villages are located in the southern areas of Zaporizhia and south-central Ukraine. US President Donald Trump called on Thursday for an unconditional ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, threatening to impose additional sanctions on any party that violates the truce. In a post on Truth social platform, Trump said that talks with both Russia and Ukraine are ongoing and that the United States is proposing a 30-day unconditional ceasefire as the optimal solution. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Thursday that he informed U.S. President Donald Trump in a phone call that Kiev is ready for a 30-day truce or ceasefire with Russia starting immediately. In his evening video address, Zelensky added that implementing the 30-day ceasefire, as first proposed by Washington in March, would be a real sign of progress toward peace. The Ukrainian president emphasized that Russia must demonstrate its willingness to end the war, starting with an unconditional ceasefire.
A 30-day ceasefire, as first proposed by Washington in March, would be a true sign of progress toward peace. Russia must demonstrate its willingness to end the war, starting with an unconditional ceasefire.
And after months of escalating tensions over tariffs and global market turmoil, President Donald Trump is signaling a shift. With trade talks scheduled in Switzerland, the administration is hinting at tariff reduction and touting new deals. But critics warn the damage may already be done and key allies are fighting back. Marwa Belawar has the report.
It appears the flames of the trade war ignited by U.S. President Donald Trump may be cooling, at least for now. His sweeping tariffs on countries like China triggered months of economic uncertainty and turbulence in global markets. But a potential truce is on the horizon. Trump recently hinted at upcoming trade talks with Beijing, signaling a willingness to reduce tariffs on Chinese goods from staggering 145% down to 80% ahead of key negotiations between the world's 2 largest economies set to take place in Switzerland. This isn't the first time Trump has taken markets by surprise. After previously suspending tariffs on many countries except China, Trump has once again grabbed headlines by announcing a historic trade deal with the United Kingdom. The agreement preserves a 10% tariff on British imports, a rate significantly lower than those applied to other global partners.
With this deal, the UK joins the United States in affirming that reciprocity and fairness is an essential and vital principle of international trade. The deal includes billions of dollars of increased market access for American exports. In addition, the UK will reduce or eliminate numerous non-tariff barriers that unfairly discriminated against American products, but this is now turning out, I think, really to be a great deal for both countries because it'll be really great for the UK also.
Other economic powers are closely watching the US-China talks. Canada, the European Union, and Mexico have already imposed retaliatory tariffs on American imports, describing Washington's approach as reckless and, in some cases, economically suicidal. As the trade chessboard resets, much is riding on the next round of negotiations. For now, the world waits watching whether Trump's high-stakes gamble pays off or plunges the global economy into deeper uncertainty.
With this, ladies and gentlemen, our program has come to an end. Thanks for watching and have a great night.